right. All right. The bottom line is that Lincoln, again, I think I told you that at the end of the lecture yesterday, I can't remember, was that Lincoln again was disappointed in the leadership of his overall commander, this time George McClellan, who he had actually given 2 chances to. So Lincoln replaces McClellan with another Union Army general by the name of General Ambrose Burnside. Did I tell you that yesterday? Okay. Now, I did think I also told you that the Union plan under Burnside is going to be no different than the Union plan in the past. The idea is to march to Richmond, win a victory there, beat the Confederates, and end the Civil War. Well, in this particular campaign that was led by Ambrose Burnside, he is first going to fight a battle at Fredericksburg prior to getting to Richmond. Okay, does that make sense? Now, the plan was to secure a victory at Fredericksburg, advance directly to the Confederate capital of Richmond, end the war once and for all. So on December 13th of 1862, December 13th of 1862, General Burnside leads his Union troops on a frontal attack against the Confederacy at Fredericksburg. On December 13th, 1862, General Ambrose Burnside leads his Union troops on a frontal attack against the Confederacy at Fredericksburg. Now, Rihanna, my dear, what does a frontal attack mean? If people are facing each other in a frontal attack, what are they doing? Face to face. So, I'm marching my Union soldiers in strict formation in a frontal attack against Rhiannon and the Confederate Army. Now, the difference is, do you think Rhiannon's Confederate Army is marching in strict formation? What are they doing? They're hiding behind rocks and trees and anything that would reflect a bullet. They're using different tactics. And so basically, Ambrose Burnside's Union troops are sitting ducks. They're marching straight into Confederate soldiers that were firing behind rocks, trees, and other unseen areas. The result was a crushing defeat for the Union, in which they lost 12,000 Union soldiers killed or wounded. 12,000 in a very short battle.
The state just keeps getting better and better.
Well, I tell you what, the Union, you won this one though, girl. Anyway, so the Union again is a crushing defeat. Now, what's going to happen in the next few months in the Civil War, considering the timeline we're on? Not yet, but what's going to happen the next couple, 3 months? Nothing. Why? There you go. They're going to dig in for the winter. It's December. Both sides are going to retreat, so to speak, in positions close to home. The Union will be close to Washington, D.C., the Confederates close to Richmond. Usually you don't fight much in the winter, and they're basically going to take the winter to rest, recuperate, and they will resume the Civil War in the spring of 1863. Okay? Now, the spring of 1863 comes, and President Lincoln is not overly impressed with Ambrose Burnside, so he replaces overall commanders again, this time with General Joe Hooker. He will lead approximately 130,000 troops into battle against the Confederacy at Chancellorsville, Virginia, which is the next subtopic, the Battle of Chancellorsville. So, spring comes, both sides resume fighting. Lincoln's disgusted with Ambrose Burnside's performance and his tactics at Fredericksburg. He replaces him with General Joe Hooker. Joe Hooker assembles a big Union army of 130,000, and they march towards Richmond and will engage Confederates at Chancellorsville, Virginia. Now, General Lee, this is a great tactician he knows he's outnumbered. Again, seems like they always are. So he takes a gamble and he splits his southern regiment in half. Splits them in half. And he's going to lead a frontal assault against the frontal assault of Joe Hooker, but he's going to ask another commander to take the other half and hit Hooker from behind. Okay, who does he assign the task of taking the other half of the Confederate forces? No, he's going to be the frontal attack. No, be wrong side there. Who? No, who's his right-hand man? Stonewall Jackson. Very good. So, General Hooker and the Union Army are expecting all of Lee's rebel troops in one area. As a result, General Lee splits his forces in half and orders General Stonewall Jackson to attack Union General Hooker's troops from a different direction. And he does so and catches Hooker completely by surprise. Okay? He damages their flank. Takes him completely by surprise. So Lee is going to out-strategize Hooker in this battle. And as a result, another Confederate military victory over the Union. Another one. But the South's going to pay a price for this one. They're going to pay a little price for this one. So even though the Confederates run to another military victory over the Union at the Battle of Chancellorsville, they're going to pay a price. Anybody know what that price was? Anybody know their history enough to know that yet? Pat Tillman. What happened to Pat Tillman? How? Very good. Thomas Stonewall Jackson was accidentally shot in the arm by one of his own men who mistook him for the enemy. So during the Battle of Chancellorsville, General Stonewall Jackson was accidentally shot by his own men. They mistook him for the enemy. And his arm had to be what, as a result? Amputated. But he was expected to live. He was expected to live. Now here's where it got a little crazy. He developed a very high fever, which they first suspected was infection from the amputation, where when it was found out the facts, he had an undetected internal injury. Nobody knows really from what, which ended up getting infected, so to speak, and killed him. So he died shortly after the Battle of Chancellorsville. Not from his arm wound and amputation, but from an undetected internal injury that ended up taking his life. Robert E. Lee was devastated, and he was quoted as saying, and I want you to write this quote down. So Lee is devastated, and he's quoted as saying, "I have lost my right arm and know not how to replace him." I have lost my right arm and know not how to replace him. So General Lee was devastated after Jackson's death, stating again, quote, "I have lost my right arm and know not how to replace him." That was the bad news. The good news was, after the victory at Chancellorsville, the Confederates' morale is as high as it's ever been. So what does Lee make the decision to do? Go on the offensive and hit the Union in the north. And where's that battle going to be? Gettysburg. That's our next subtopic. Now, I'll tell you, kiddos, there's going to be a lot of notes on Gettysburg and a lot of facts that you're going to need to know. So you can either refer up to my map up here, or you might want to pull yours out. Mine's just as good, so you probably wouldn't need to, but you can. It's just like that. You sure you don't got one? I'll bet you got one. Right around those pictures I gave you. Look around those pictures I gave you when we first started.
I never got one.
Did you get up this? You didn't get any pictures?
This one you got the purple one. Look behind the purple.
I found it.
Yes.
So remember I gave them all at the start. Yep. Gave them all at the start, so you should all have the map. But you can look at mine. Okay? Now, what do you think Lincoln did after his loss at Chancellorsville? He replaced commanders again. This was an interesting story. Kind of an interesting story on this, because on June 27th of 1863, on June 27th of 1863, Lincoln sent a letter to the camp of Union General George Meade. Sent him a letter. And George Meade was suffering from morale issues just like the rest of the Union Army. And when George Meade, the Union General, receives this personal message from Lincoln on June 27th, 1863, what does he think it is, Navy? No, he's thinking the opposite. Yeah, he thinks he's getting fired. He thinks that somehow he's getting fired because things haven't gone real well. Instead, like Navy said, it's a letter to inform him that he's been chosen as overall commander of Union forces, and he will lead the Army of the Potomac in the defense of Gettysburg because they've gotten wind that the rebels are coming. Okay? So on June 27th, 1863, President Lincoln sends a personal message to the camp of Union General George Meade. Meade gets the letter, and before he opens it, he thinks he's fired. But he finds out he's not fired, that he's been named overall commander of Union forces and will lead the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg. Now, while Lincoln is changing commanders again, Confederate General Robert E. Lee is marching his Confederate Army toward Pennsylvania, 75,000 strong. So this is going to be a big dust-up here. So as Lincoln is changing commanders, General Robert E. Lee of the Confederacy is marching his rebel troops towards Pennsylvania, 75,000 strong. Now, Lee's strategy is simple. We're going to win this big battle on northern soil in Pennsylvania, and we're going to have our own independent country as we planned from the start. He's very confident in victory in Pennsylvania, and he marches towards that inevitable fight. Well, a few days later, General Meade leaves Washington, D.C., and he marches 100,000 Union troops on a collision course with the Confederates that's going to happen in a little town in Pennsylvania called Gettysburg. So a few days after he's informed that he is the overall commander of Union forces, Union General Meade leaves the D.C. area and marches 100,000 Union soldiers on what's going to be a collision course with the Confederates at a little town in Pennsylvania known as Gettysburg. Now the Battle of Gettysburg is going to last 3 days, kiddos. July 1st, 2nd, 3rd of 1863. July 1st, 2nd, 3rd. And the battle starts on July 1st, and it's really kind of just a little skirmish. Is how the Battle of Gettysburg starts. It doesn't start with 75,000 Confederate troops hammering 100,000 Union troops. It starts with a little skirmish on July 1st of 1863, just west of this town of Gettysburg that we're talking about. And it involves advanced troops on both sides. Now, Lily, my dear, what are advanced troops? Well, they're well trained, advanced. If I send an advanced team to Washington, D.C., before we get there, before I take the mass group, what are they kind of? Scouts, yeah. Advanced troops are troops that go out and kind of see where the enemy is. Scout things out a little bit, okay? And what happens on July 1st of 1863 at 10:30 in the morning is a small group of Confederate advanced troops meet up with a small unit of Union advanced troops. These two scouting parties, so to speak, found each other. Okay? The main armies are farther away. The Confederate Army is 8 miles away, and the Union Army is 30 miles away. But these are advanced troops, and they happen to collide at the little town of Gettysburg, and as a result of that, at 10:30 a.m. on July 1st of 1863, officially what we know as the Battle of Gettysburg begins. Well, during this skirmish between these troops, the Confederates get the upper hand. and the Union begins to retreat, and the Confederates are being commanded by General Richard Ewell. And Confederate General Richard Ewell and the Confederates are pushing the Union troops back. They're retreating, they being the Union. So during this first little battle at Gettysburg, Confederate General Richard Ewell and his troops are beating back Union forces, and the Union forces are starting to retreat. And they retreat right through the town of Gettysburg and head up a ridge known as, on the map here, kiddos, Cemetery Ridge. This is where they go, up to this ridge. This black that you see all the way around here is a series of ridges in the vicinity of Gettysburg. And these soldiers skedaddle, the Union soldiers, they skedaddle and they head up Cemetery Ridge. Well, there's some Union troops stationed on Cemetery Ridge under the direction of Lieutenant Frank Haskell. He had stationed himself and a few troops on top of Cemetery Ridge. And he's watching as his Union troops are retreating from the town of Gettysburg, heading toward him for protection up on Cemetery Ridge. So as they're retreating up the ridge, what do you guess, Carla, that Frank Haskell is doing as he watches these Union soldiers coming up the ridge toward him in retreat? What does he do?
He's getting ready to defend.
What's that?
He's getting ready to defend.
Yeah, he's gonna watch him up the hill, and then he's gonna get him organized, and he's gonna get him turned around, and he's gonna get him to start fighting these approaching rebels. So he's watching these Union troops retreat. As soon as they get closer and closer to him, he's getting them organized, getting them turned around for a counter-attack fight. Okay? So that's what he's doing up there. And the Confederate troops are advancing towards Cemetery Ridge, and who's going to have the advantage once Haskell gets them organized? Union. Why? Because they're on the high ground. So what Haskell does is he watches these Union troops retreat towards him and sees the Confederates approaching, as he turns these Union soldiers around, gets them organized. And what do they use for protection and also to rest their rifles on as they're shooting back at the Confederates? Tombstones. Cemetery Ridge, thus the name. There are crosses up there, there are tombstones. The Union soldiers are hiding behind the tombstones. They're using the tombstones and any other crosses that might be there as rifle rests, and they are firing back at the Confederates. Now, in the meantime, General Meade has arrived with his big force. And what he's done, if you look, and again the black is the ridge, the blue is the Union, he advances from Maryland here, and then he positions his troops on top of the ridge all the way around. And this is about a 3-mile distance from Little Round Top all the way to Culp's Hill. Now, you got to look at this map for a minute. So if they're on this side, where's the high ground? On this side or this side? This side. Yeah, they're coming this way. This is the low ground. They're up on this ridge. This is the high ground. Does that make sense? And you can see by the blue dashes that they've got the entire ridge defended, and it's about 3 miles from Little Round Top all the way around to Culp's Hill. About 3 miles. So at the same time they're having this little skirmish at Cemetery Ridge, General George Meade and the Union placed their soldiers all along that long ridge that stretched from Little Round Top across Cemetery Ridge to nearby Culp's Hill. So the Union line is on the high ground, and they're covering about 3 miles of ridge line. Does that make sense? Now, if you're Confederate General Lee, and you're arriving from Virginia, what's the first thing you notice when you see this ridge line? What else? Who's got the advantage? The Union, because he sees that the Union is occupying this entire ridge line. So he sees right away we're at a disadvantage in this battle because we do not have the high ground. Okay? At this point, and Lee is a great general, he decides, you know what we're going to do? We're going to try to take Culp's Hill from the Union. And once they take Culp's Hill, Emily, what would they do with that high ground, do you think? Once they take Culp's Hill, what are they going to do? I know they're going to use it, but what are they going to do there? What would be their best line of offense if they got control of that high ground? To shoot at all the rest of those Union soldiers with what? Cannons. So they're going to put their artillery up on Culp's Hill and start blasting away at those defense lines on this ridge. So at this point, General Lee makes the decision to take Culp's Hill from the Union. It's a position on the far north of Union lines along the ridge, and he wants to gain possession of Culp's Hill so he can eventually set up rebel cannons to fire at Union positions along the ridge. So he gives this order to General Ewell. Who's General Ewell? The guy that was fighting where?
Cemetery Hill.
Cemetery Hill. He says to Ewell, quote, "Take that hill," parentheses, Culp's, meaning Culp's Hill, if practicable. If practicable. He says to Ewell, gives him the order. Take that hill, meaning Culp's Hill, if practicable. What does that mean? What does that mean, if practicable?
If you can do it, do it.
Yeah, if you can do it, do it. Do you think he expects him to do it?
Yes.
Okay. Well, at this point, General Ewell doesn't believe it's practicable to take Culp's Hill. So he does not do so.